From influencer to inmate. Ooh, I like that. I'm gonna steal that. These women were pillars in their community. There were people that looked up to them. Jodi Hildebrandt ran connections, and as you guys have heard, people literally worshipped her in her therapy sessions. People went to Jodi for therapy. They went to her for marital issues. Ruby Franke, well, she had the 8 Passengers YouTube channel where her and her family garnered over millions of subscribers on there. And for Ruby Franke, well, you know, if you were someone who maybe didn't come from a great family background and you were looking for a family sometimes on the internet, sometimes you would watch these YouTube family channels and you'd feel like you belong, that you're a part of something. Maybe you yourself just want someone to relate to. Maybe you're also a mother, a father. Maybe you want to know how to discipline your kids, how to grow your family unit, and you look to Ruby Franke as someone that was a good influence, or so you thought. These people, whether they looked up to Ruby Franke, Jodi Hildebrandt, they had their reasons. Now back to influencer to inmate. 2020 did a doc of Ruby Franke, and it's called From Mom Influencer to Felon. But I think I like influencer inmate better. This came out roughly about a month ago when all the evidence from this case was released to the public. The doc is about an hour and 20 minutes long. Some of you guys told me that you don't have access to the doc. I don't know if it's because maybe you guys don't have like a Hulu subscription. I think some people said that it's not available in your region. So I kind of want to talk about it and do like a little general recap of it. There are some things in this doc that is mentioned that we never heard from anywhere else on any other online source or anything. The opening scene, well, it starts with Jodi Hildebrandt being dragged out of her house by law enforcement. She thought she was safe when she was on the phone with a lawyer, but no, they dragged her out. Probably one of the best moments on body cam footage ever. And then it cuts to Ruby Franke. Listen, for those of you guys who watch 8 Passengers, in hindsight, after knowing everything, people went back and were able to find some clippings from the family vlogs. There's this one scene where Ruby Franke is talking to one of her daughters, and I think it might be E, and she has a doll in her hand. She has it in front of the child's face, and she's like, if you cut one more thing in my house, I'm gonna look at me. I'm gonna take the scissors and cut its head off. The child reacts immediately because that's a horrifying thing to hear, especially from your mom. And she looks, the child looks pretty young. Not like, oh, you know, like 9-year-old, 10-year-old. No, she looks like she's like, I don't know, like 2, 3, 4 maybe? Who says that? The child starts crying when Ruby says that, and you can see there's an older sibling in the back who reflexively reaches out for the sibling to try to coax them. There's a lot of moments like this in the vlogs, and maybe when people are watching at the moment, they're like, oh, you know, she's just joking. Like, oh, you know, I'm sure she's a good person. But when we're watching it now in retrospect, it is so cringy. Not just cringy, but it's just so unsettling. So in the doc, we're transitioning to the Ring camera. And this is the Ring camera that a lot of you guys have seen, where you could see the child R. He had just escaped from Jodi Hildebrandt's house. But in the Ring camera, you can see just unhealthy he is. He's wearing clothes that is clearly way too big, way too baggy for him because of how thin he is. He's not wearing shoes. Keep in mind, it's very hot during this time. He's not wearing any shoes. He's only got a pair of socks on. He knocks on one neighbor's door, no answer. So he's like, okay, well, let me just go to a different neighbor then. He goes up to another house and voila, there's someone there, thank goodness. Now, initially when R approaches the neighbor, he's like, hey, can you do me a favor? The neighbor's like, well, what is it? And you know what? I would probably be the same way too, because if I had a child or anyone show up at my house, I would be really sussed out. I'd be looking out in the horizon, making sure there wasn't someone hiding in the bushes ready to jump me, or maybe it's a scam. I don't know. I'm just a very wary person. But as the neighbor's talking to R, he calls 911. You can hear in the 911 call. This is one of the most, it's like one of the most like heartbreaking 911 calls. Like honestly, it's just so sad because the neighbor realizes just how severe of a situation this is, because he looks at the child. He says the child is emaciated. He notices that there is injuries on the wrists, on the ankles, and he starts crying. He starts breaking down. This is not easy. EMTs arrive pretty quickly, and they also notice the injuries, the malnourishment. Same thing with law enforcement. They also notice the wrists, the ankles. The responding team was so upset at what they saw that you could even see in the body cam footage of some of them crying. Now, the cool thing about this doc, unlike some other docs, they actually were able to get people that responded that day to come on the doc and do some interviews and just kind of talk about what they saw that day, how they felt. One person mentioned that when R had to lift one of his legs, he winced in pain. However, during the entire time, R remained very stoic. He didn't even cry at all. They asked him, where'd you get your injuries from? R was like, oh, for my mom, Ruby Franke, and Jody Hildebrand. The police officer said it was so bad that he had to excuse himself from the ambulance, because imagine this. You're the police officer. This situation is so emotional. You yourself are emotional. You're trying to keep it together. You probably have tears coming out like on the verge of your eyes, right? But because the child who went through this terrible ordeal is sitting there stoically, you don't want to break down in front of them, because you want to keep yourself together for the sake of the child. They were able to find out exactly how did R escape from Jody's house. R said that he was able to unlock himself from the handcuffs. Now, I don't know if he was able to find the key and unlock himself, or maybe he was able to find another tool to unlock himself, or maybe he was just so skinny that he was able to slip out of it. I'm not really quite sure. But the moment that he got out of the handcuffs, he was able to slide the glass door and exit out of the house. Now, they asked him, what was your motivation for leaving the house? And it's purely just this. He was hungry and he was very fucking thirsty. Now, you got to remember that R is 12 years old at this time. From what we've heard from R so far and from what he's gone through, his demeanor just seems so mature for someone for his age. I remember when I was 12 years old. I don't know. I don't know if I was that mature when I was 12. I don't think so. I don't know. I feel like I would be a hot mess. But anyways, R was able to tell the police that there are 2 more siblings at Jody Hildebrand's home. Now, he doesn't know about their condition or anything like that, but he thinks that there's 2 siblings there. So at this point, law enforcement, this is where we see the body cam footage of them knocking down Jody's door, and they yanked her out. And she's like, whoa, 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 where's, hello, you can't just come into my house. And they were like, yeah, we can. This is under exigent circumstances, because they thought that there were children at Jody Hildebrand's house that were under life-threatening circumstances. They were able to barge in because this was a life-saving effort. In the interview, law enforcement said that they went through a bedroom, and that bedroom had a bathroom. However, it was kind of weird that there were no clothes in the drawer. They found a child sitting there in the closet. What we saw a very blurred version of that. The child looked very, very scared. Like, you could see it on her face. And at this point, they were already co-communicating with R. I think he might have been at the hospital this time. They asked R, hey, do you have a little brother? And R is like, no, I have a little sister. I mean, they did shave her head about, last time I saw her was about like a month ago. And people are like, a month ago? You guys were in the same house, but you didn't see each other for a month. Now, if you remember seeing Jody Hildebrand's house, we went over her house, like in the evidence video, I think. And then I have seen her house before because we looked at it on Zillow. It's on sale right now. But you can go through all the images of the house and you can see just how big this compound is. Like, it's literally like a compound. It's 10,000 square footage and it's huge. Now, it's so big to the point where during this time, she actually had a portion of the house rented out. It was like Airbnb to some guests. And we never heard from those guests. But can you imagine if you're an Airbnb guest there and then all of a sudden the police is like raiding the place? Yeah, you probably want to get the hell out of there. Law enforcement said the child was very scared and kept asking, oh, where's Jody? Where's Jody? Would Jody be okay if they knew you guys were here? This is R's little sister, E. She was 9 years old at the time. E never asked for her mother at all. It was always Jody, Jody, Jody. The police officer said that he sat there in the closet with E for about 2 hours. He just wanted her to be comfortable with just his presence, just being there. He kept telling her, trying to console her, like, hey, you're okay. You're okay. You're not going to be in any trouble. You're okay. And of course, the child was very motionless. She was very afraid. They weren't really able to get her to respond, get her to say anything back, but they were like, hey, I heard that you might like pizza. And this is what perked her up. So they ordered her a whole pizza. She apparently ate the whole thing. They ordered her another pizza. She ate half of that. She had a milkshake. A 9-year-old child eating this much just shows exactly just how hungry she must have been. She was sitting there in the closet, eating the pizza very slowly, gingerly. And it wasn't until 4 hours later that she finally felt comfortable enough to leave the closet and go to the ambulance. R said that he had 2 siblings at the house. So they found one, and law enforcement, they are scrambling to try to find a second child. They come across a safe room that they didn't have a code to. They go to Jody, and we saw this in the body cam footage where they went to Jody, and Jody was like, I don't remember the combo. I don't know. The last time I was in there was like 6 years ago. I don't know. I must have forgotten. Did you really forget? Did you really? At some point, they were finally able to get the combination from her, and inside was not another child, but we did find a working refrigerator, which, if you haven't been in there for 6 years, would you really have a working refrigerator all plugged in like that? I don't know. Seems a little bit shady to me. But not only that, they were able to find some rope, some handcuffs, which seems pretty yikes. If you're gonna find something in the safe room like this, why would you have those items? Now let's talk about Ruby. Apparently, Ruby was in a panic driving all the way from the north to the south because remember, Springville to Jodi Hildebrandt is about 3 hours away. She was driving all the way down and she shows up at the police station. She goes up there and she's like, where are my kids? Are my kids here? And they're like, no. So she runs on out, and this is when she appears at Jodi Hildebrandt's home. Now, she must have known what was waiting for her when she arrived there because law enforcement in their interview said that she showed up, didn't even ask about the kids, didn't even ask where they were, how are they okay? She kind of just showed up there and just stayed silent. And thankfully, we get to hear from the arresting officer because remember in the police interview where she was just sitting there with her face awkwardly blinking, I'm so glad we got to hear from her because she said, it felt as if Ruby was looking through her, that Ruby had these 3 long blinks. And she was like, I don't know what to do with this. Are you trying to speak in Morse code? But then Ruby ends up asking for an attorney. So that's the end of that. The doc then shifts over to 2015. Why 2015? Well, that was when the 8 Passengers YouTube channel started. It showcased Ruby Franke as someone who was a good mom, someone who was a good Mormon, someone who was very discipline focused in her channel. And this was a very niche channel where it was about a Mormon mom influencer. They talked about how her videos would get about over 1 million views on each one. However, 2022, they decided to abandon the vlogs. And that's when she joined Jodi Hildebrandt. There's this video where she's sitting with Jodi Hildebrandt and she says this, we want to have a relationship where we feel closer and there's love. I don't know, man, when I saw that, because, you know, given some of the rumors about Jodi Hildebrandt and maybe her potentially being a lesbian, it kind of sounded like to me that maybe they were pursuing a relationship together. But again, that's something that's not confirmed. That's all speculation. It's all conjecture, but, you know. And then it shifts over to the deputy attorney who talks about how children, well, they don't belong in hospitals, and he's breaking down in this interview. So back to law enforcement, trying to locate the second child that are talked about. This is when they were able to communicate with Springville. Again, remember, this is about 3.5 hours away. The Franke family, they all originally lived in Springville. They were able to contact Springville Police Department, and they waited outside of the Franke home waiting to get a warrant so they can break down the door because, again, they're looking for another child. They took a ram, broke down the door, and it took them about 5 minutes to actually check out the house. Remember, there were speculations as to why the Franke home was broken down. They were like, oh, you know, was it because of Sherry? Because remember, Kevin Franke, he wanted to press charges against Sherry for robbing him, I guess, and taking some stuff, but people were like, oh, you know, was it because of Sherry? Did she break down the door? Nah, a lot of people didn't believe that. We find out that it was because police had a warrant. They broke down the door. They went to the house. When their initial search was over, they went into a more refined search where they were telling other law enforcement to look into small, tiny spaces where an emaciated child might be able to fit in. So maybe refrigerators, maybe some large bags, maybe some nooks and crannies. And of course, they didn't find a second child. We soon found out that aside from E and R, there was not another emaciated child. Now, they were still trying to locate the teenage daughters of Ruby Franke. Sherry Franke, this is where she stepped in and helped with investigations. She tipped off law enforcement that, oh, I think one of my sister goes to like a rec center. Maybe you should check there. So they go over there, they check, and they're like, oh, you know, they did leave, but they left with this woman that we didn't really know who she was. Turns out that was Pam Bochner. And here comes in the body cam footage where Pam Bochner was on there, and she was like, connections? Oh, connections. She made it seem like she didn't know what connections was, or she wasn't very familiar with it. I don't know, that's just the vibes that I got. But lo and behold, we found out that she was the president of Connections. You go to connections.com. She's a president on there. That website is no longer available, though. It's gone. So I wonder if Pam had a hand in that. The teenage daughters were taken to state custody. Thank goodness they weren't with Pam anymore. Miss Pam, oh, I need them to come and clean my floors and do the chores for me because I have guests coming over. Now, Kevin shows up at the police station, and law enforcement, they did say that they considered him a suspect. They found out that Kevin moved out, Chad had moved out. Chad is the oldest of the teenage boys. Sherry is the eldest of all the children. And at that point, she was already gone into college. Now, Kevin said that he moved out July, but he was still having some therapy sessions with Jodi. His lawyer, Randy Kester, is also on the dock as well. And he talks about how Kevin was told to stay away from the children, not to contact the children, not to contact Ruby unless Jodi tells you to. Now, I know a lot of us giving Kevin and Frankie the side eye, because we're like, how could you not have contact with your children? How could you have not done this, X, Y, and Z? We just don't understand maybe the circumstance that he was in. Because remember, there's been other victims that has come out and said Jodi did the same thing, how Jodi was a marriage counselor and how Jodi separated the wife from the husband. And Jodi herself in her book even boasts about separating couples for 2 years and then reuniting them afterwards. 2 years. That's crazy to me. I did entertain that maybe when the victims came out, Adam Paul Steed, Jesse Hildebrand, maybe Kevin was like, oh, this is a good opportunity to piggyback off of their stories and be part of the victimhood myself. However, we do see that Kevin does bring up that, he was seeing Jodi for therapy and that he was admitting his addiction to porn and how he felt like he wasn't treating his wife right. These were the things that were being echoed that were similar to Adam Paul Steed. But you got to remember that the police interview took place before Adam Paul Steed came out, before Jesse Hildebrand came out. So that's why I'm more inclined to believe Kevin and his story. After Jodi's victims came out, Randy Kester did an interview with multiple media outlets. When he heard the story of other victims, he started realizing that he himself was also being manipulated by Jodi, that he was also a victim of Jodi as well. Now, there could be some stuff that comes out in the future where, Kevin's a liar, he's a bad person, blah, blah, blah. But I'll wait until then to really judge him. I think for now, I'm just kind of like hoping that, I hope that he'll be good for his kids. Maybe he'll get custody back. I'm just a little bit concerned that if he does get custody back of his younger children, that he might try to urge them to forgive their mom because he might still be completely in love with Ruby Franke. He might already feel like he forgives her. I really think it should be up to the children. Without the influence of their dad, without the influence of their grandparents, Ruby's mom and dad, or their aunts and uncles. It should really be up to them. And I hope they won't be guilt tripped for that. Then we go to the jailhouse calls, okay? Jailhouse calls between Kevin Franke and Ruby Franke. And Ruby's like, are we in the news? The devil has been after me for years. The devil has been after me for years. Where have we also heard that? That is the same thing that Jodi was saying in her jailhouse calls. Oh, the devil has been after me for years. I'm sorry. Jodi, Ruby, the devil has been after you guys for years, but that's because you guys are each other's devils, okay? Y'all are the devils. Let's talk about Sherry. Law enforcement did do an interview with Sherry, and Sherry shares that she was estranged from the family because of how their parents treated her, because of their strict parenting and what they put her through. Now, remember Sherry, how she called DCFS way before this incident happened? She was concerned because a neighbor had reached out to her saying like, hey, we saw your siblings kind of like running around the street, like they're home alone. Your mom hasn't really been around. And she calls law enforcement to come by and do a welfare check on them. Now, law enforcement, they weren't really able to do much. They tried knocking at the doors. They could see the children behind the curtains and stuff like that, but no one was answering the door. They can't go in there, ram the door down. They did do an interview with the doc, and they said that, well, we did try to get a warrant. It wasn't approved because we weren't able to show that there was a crime happening at the time. Now, back to those awful jailhouse calls. Remember the jailhouse call where Ruby's like, adults have a really hard time understanding that children can be evil and what it takes to fight it. Now, Kevin's like, oh, the children, they've been in the hospital for 3 days. Ruby's like, ugh, so weird. It's so unnecessary. Oh my God. Does Ruby really feel bad for what she did? Or does Ruby just feel bad only because she realized that Jodi really was a devil and that Jodi was going to turn on her probably, and that she needed to do whatever it takes to preserve herself? Because, let's face it, she wasn't going to see Jodi anytime soon. It wasn't like she was going to get out. I mean, I know initially in the jailhouse calls, she entertained maybe getting out in 10 days because she's just delusional maybe. She really thought that what she did was not a big deal to her children. To me, I really just do think that Ruby just went into self-preservation mode. Ruby knows how to work the room. She's been on YouTube for how many years? I think she really knows how to tell people what they want to hear. I think she's a huge people pleaser and she wants to be on people's good side. So now the good side to be on is probably to be the good side of maybe the public, the good side of her children, the good side of her husband. So I'm glad that she switched from Jodi Hildebrand to, her family. But I don't know. Does she really feel bad for what she did? Was she really brainwashed? I feel like she already had the inclinations within her. It was Jodi Hildebrand that just brought it out even more and maybe like exaggerated it. But I know that, she's trying to go for the brainwash defense. Like, oh, I was brainwashed by this woman. And I could see that her family, are supporting that. It kind of reminds me of Lori and Chad Daybell, where I know they're trying to say, oh my God, poor Chad, he was like brainwashed by this beautiful goddess, blah, blah, blah. But no, you just have two pieces of shit that met and their interests just happened to align. And they were both sadistic enough to either hurt/murder children. I don't know. When I think of Lori Daybell, Chad Daybell, I kind of see a lot of that in Ruby and Jodi Hildebrandt. I think it's just two sickos meeting up together. I don't think it was one that brainwashed the other. I think it was just two sickos and they're like, oh my God, like we have things in common. Huh? We like hurting children. These women wanted to control. These women wanted to dominate. The doc talks about the controversy that 8 passengers went through. And honestly, the only time I've heard of 8 passengers was when it was a whole ordeal about Ruby. She was making such a big deal about bringing lunch to her youngest daughter, E, at the time, and how the internet accused her of being really abusive and kind of horrible to her young children. Now, apparently during this time, they received a lot of death threats to the point where someone went to their house and left notes at their home, and how they went from uploading multiple videos throughout the day to dwindling it down to every couple weeks, every couple months, the part where the channel just ended up dying. I think we're about like maybe halfway through the doc, and thank goodness, because I was a little bit afraid that they were only going to focus on Ruby Franke because she's like the big influencer, the big YouTuber. And the title was Momfluencer to Felon, but thank goodness they are going to bring Jodi Hildebrandt into this because I think she's a huge, huge part of this equation. They talk about how Jodi Hildebrandt was really well known. She was very well known as a really good therapist in Sex Addict Anonymous. And we had former patients of Jodi who was on the doc and they went there to talk about their experience with her. One person talked about how, when they met Jodi, they thought she was very kind. They thought she was very charismatic. However, as they started attending more of these sessions, these group therapy sessions, they were saying how they couldn't say certain things. It was almost like it was a public shaming session where if you didn't really align with certain things or if you didn't do things correctly, you'd be shame. And this was done within the group. And then they were able to get Adam Paul Steed. If you guys haven't watched Adam Paul Steed on Mormon Stories podcast, I don't know. I know they had to take the episode down. I don't know if it's back already. But if the episode is back, I highly recommend you guys to check it out. Adam Paul Steed went on there. Jesse Hildebrandt, Jodi Hildebrandt's niece, also was on there as well. And you get to hear from their story. So Adam Paul Steed goes on there, talks about his experience with Jodi, talks about how Jodi did a really good job at separating men from the wife. Now, it was like, if the men looked at porn once, it's like, oh my God, you have a porn addiction. You sleep on the couch. If he looks at it again, all right, you kick him out of the house. Jodi just did not have a tolerance for men like this. Now, I don't know if Jodi had some sort of issues, maybe with her former husband that she divorced. Apparently, they were only married for about like a year or two, and they were divorced after Jodi gave birth to like one of their children. They talked about how Jodi breached client confidentiality by reaching out to Adam Paul Steed's school and his church. He was kicked out from the church. He was kicked out from his school. And luckily, I'm so glad that Adam Paul Steed decided to report her and subpoena her because there's this whole court case about this. Jodi was on probation for about 18 months. Her therapy license was on, suspended, but she was able to get it back. And in 2012, the church did end up removing her from the resource list. And then we talk about the crazy stuff that happened. A lot of this stuff was mentioned in Kevin Franke's second police interview. Talks about how, Ruby Franke got into connections. At some point, Jodi was their therapist, and Jodi moved in to Kevin and Ruby's home. Okay, she moved in. She joined their anniversary dinners, and law enforcement talked about how it was really odd to hear this because what kind of therapist would live with their patients? Now, I remember hearing about this. The area where Jodi Hildebrandt's house is in, it's actually called Hellhole Canyon, which I think is perfect for anywhere that Jodi Hildebrandt's going to reside in. Law enforcement did talk about how they were able to interview the kids for a second time and get more information out of them. R told them that he was forced to sleep outside. He was forced to stand outside in the heat. And for his birthday, he had to stand outside in the heat all day. This actually corresponds with Ruby's journal because Ruby's journal, she did mention R's birthday. Now, they mentioned for E, it did take her a little bit of time for her to open up. She wasn't as talkative as R. E talked about how she was constantly accused of stealing water. It was so bad to the point that Ruby and Jody would watch her shower to make sure she wasn't secretly drinking it, or that when she was brushing her teeth, that they had to turn off the sink water because they didn't want her to secretly steal the water as she was brushing her teeth. These people are sickos. Like, oh my God, these people are sickos. That's why I wanted to read Ruby's journal that revealed everything, because when we all heard about this case, we knew it was bad. It wasn't until the evidence came out where we realized just exactly how sick and how bad it was. It was just like a million times more worse than you could ever imagine. Now, remember when we were going to the evidence photos and I was like, oh, why are they taking pictures of the trampoline? And why are they taking pictures of like the indents on the floor? Apparently, they did go back to Jody's house and they took more pictures because R said that he was forced to jump on this trampoline for about 8 to 12 hours a day. And the trampoline had such a buildup on there from all the sweat that was coming out of him. And you can see all the indents and mark of where the trampoline was as he was jumping on it constantly. You could see the trampoline like shifting around. The kids had lost so much weight that the clothes they owned ended up being so baggy for them. You know, when you're a kid, you're growing. Clothes are supposed to be getting smaller and smaller for you, not baggier and baggier. Art told law enforcement about a silver handcuff and a black handcuff that was used on him, and they were able to corroborate this by finding them in Jody's house. Now the doc is going to shift over to Jessie Hildebrand. If you guys don't remember, Jessie Hildebrand is Jody Hildebrand's niece. Jody Hildebrand, I think, is the youngest of, 5 kids. One of Jody Hildebrand's brother has a daughter named Jessie, and I'm so glad that they were able to bring Jessie to be included in this doc so we can hear from her side of the story, because what's really important about her story, it goes way back as far as 2008. Jessie talks about how they were a teenager, normal, typical teenager, grew up in a Mormon household, wasn't allowed to wear makeup, they're not allowed to drink caffeine. However, Jessie, as a teenager, you're trying to explore your individuality. You're trying to explore your freedom. And sometimes as a teenager, you don't get along with your parents. And just imagine this, going over to your grandparents to celebrate the 50th anniversary. You don't get along with your mom. Mom asks you to do the dishes. And you're like, I don't want to do the dishes. Okay, that sounds like a normal teenage thing. There are some teenagers that rebel. There are some teenagers that don't want to do chores. That seems like a teenage thing, right? Jessie goes down to the basement, take a nap, and when Jessie wakes up, they realize their entire family left them there. Jody comes sweeping and saying, I'll be taking care of you from now on. And what is the first thing that Jody does? Jody strips Jessie of their identity. Jody cuts off all Jessie's hair. They're not allowed to wear makeup anymore. They weren't even allowed to go to the bathroom without having Jody hovering over them. They've been bound. They've been blindfolded. They were told constantly that anything that comes out of their mouth, they're lying. And anything that comes out of Jessie's mouth, well, they're just trying to manipulate. Jessie would attend church functions where people would go up to Jessie and they weren't allowed to say anything back. People would ask her questions. People would talk to her, ask her questions, and she would just stare at them blankly because they knew Aunt Jody was somewhere out there hovering over them, making sure that Jessie wasn't going to break any rules. There was even a family member that corroborates with Jessie's story about how they saw Jessie having duct tape covering over their mouth. The doc was able to get a colleague of Jody Hildebrand. Now, they talked about how they used to work with Jody, and it was weird that Jody would bring this girl with her and keep her locked up in a room for hours at a time where it was like really cold. And they went up to Jody asking like, hey, there's like this little girl that you brought. Like, why is she just sitting in the room all day? And apparently Jody got really agitated and was like, don't talk to her. Just don't talk to her. But the coworker, being a decent human being, realizes that the child is probably cold down there and brings a jacket over to her. And Jessie talks about how this is the point where they realize this is their only chance for escape. It's now or never. Jessie books it out of there. Jessie never comes back. Jessie ends up having to stay at a homeless shelter for the time being because they really didn't want to go back to Aunt Jody's. We were able to get into the mind of law enforcement when they found the journal of Ruby Franke. Because apparently if you're a Mormon, you're encouraged to keep a journal. And that's what Ruby Franke did, except she kept a journal essentially listing everything that she did to her children and also Jody's involvement in that. It was like a gold mine to them. We hear in the doc for the first time the message that R left. He was essentially outside and using rocks, he left a message saying, jail. I will call when I get there. I don't know if he left the message on the day that he escaped or was it like a different time that he escaped. I could have sworn maybe Ruby mentioned this in her journal, but I'm not really quite sure. Might have it mixed up with something else. All right, so Kevin Franke's second police interview. Remember how I complained how, this file has no date, there's no video or anything, there's no body cam timestamp. We don't know when this interview actually happened. But we find on this doc that it happened September 12, 2023. This was roughly about 2 weeks after the horror ordeal. Kevin has reconciled with his 2 older children, both Chad and Sherry, and he's trying to file custody for the rest of the 4 children. Now, at this point, we've heard of the jailhouse calls where Ruby decides to finally turn on Jodi Hildebrand. We're like, what, 4 months later? Ruby finally decides to plead guilty on December 18. Now, she agreed to testify against Jodi. The state said that they planned to add additional charges to Jodi, but then Jodi also decided to plead guilty as well. Probably because Jodi realized how things weren't looking good for her. Now, remember in Jodi's sentencing, she made it seem like, oh, the reason why I'm pleading guilty and doing this plea deal is because I want to save these children. I don't want them to have to go up there and relive this, blah, 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 blah. No, it wasn't because you didn't want to drag the children all over again. It was because you realized Ruby, their mother, was going to testify against you, and you probably would have gone down for way worse. Ruby agreed to testify against Jodi. They would drop 2 charges against her. And additionally, when she goes up to the Board of Pardons and Parole, the state is now not allowed to argue for her to stay there longer. That is part of the plea deal. So both women are looking at what, like 4 to 30 years at this point. And I think it was the state prosecutor in his interview, he talks about how the women should, at a minimum, be there long enough until the adult children are grown enough to handle them being out. He also talks about how he hopes that, Ruby can be reformed and not be a bad influence to her children, and that it really should be up to the kids, up to the victims, of whether or not they want to have a relationship with her, which is what I said. We do also get an update on both E and R. Apparently they look healthy now, they've gained their weight, and they are just happy and healthy. They're trying to go back to their hobbies, but you got to remember that these kids suffered a very severe trauma. It's not something you're just going to get over with, right, in a couple of months, maybe not even a couple of years. This is something that they're going to have to work through and process for the rest of their lives. E and R were placed together in the same foster care. However, for the 2 teenage girls, they're not really sure where they're placed, but most likely somewhere under state custody. And the doc ends with this. Why did they end with this? The parole board determines during the time that the women are serving when they can come out. So remember, during sentencing, everyone's like, oh my God, like how many years did they get? How many years did they get? Why did they get a range? Just because it's not the judge that determines the sentencing, it's the Board of Pardons and Parole. And this is what the doc ends with. They say the women can get out, or the women could be eligible for parole as early as August 2027. Why? That's like in 3 years, okay? If these women come out in 3 years, no, that would just be horrible. I would say at a minimum, Ruby, 10 years. Jodi, definitely more than 10 years. At a minimum. All right, y'all. So that's it for the doc. Let me know if you guys ended up watching it. And let me know if you guys didn't have a chance to watch it and you enjoyed watching this type of content where I kind of just summarize it for you. You can put me in the background. I can tell you guys about it. But there's this other doc that I really want to watch. And dude, you guys ever watch JCS? I'm sure a lot of you guys know exactly what JCS is, but JCS did a video. I think it was called Jennifer's Plan, and it was so well done. It was very intriguing. It was one of my favorite JCS videos. That one and my other top 2 was the one with Stephanie Lazarez. Stephanie Lazarez, the woman who's a detective, and then she was found out many years later, like 10, 20, 30 years later, that she was actually a killer. She killed her love interest's fiance, and she wasn't caught until years later, and the interview was just great. But anyways, I want to watch the Jennifer Pan Netflix doc, but let me know if you guys are interested in maybe having me recap that. I might just do it anyways, okay? I haven't seen it yet, but we're gonna watch it maybe tomorrow. And yeah, other than that, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you guys are like, Corgi, what's up with your hair today? I'll explain my hair, not in the live streams, but I will explain my hair maybe in the upcoming vlog, because it was a whole process. Okay, I have to tell you guys all about it, but not in the true crime stuff. Anyways, y'all, I hope you guys have a good one. Take care, and I will see you guys in the next stream. I stream live on YouTube and on Twitch as well. Now, I do my true crime stuff. I do the dual stream on YouTube and Twitch, but when I play video games, I just do that only on Twitch. So if you guys are interested in that, feel free to stop by either one. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you guys do a like, comment below what you guys thought about this doc if you've seen it. If you guys are new here, feel free to subscribe. We'll be back. I do live streams and all that good stuff. All right. Gandalf is, I fixed him today. He was a little bit schlumpy today, but he's all fixed now. He still has no underwear though, but that's our secret.